off again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words that make...
A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. You can order yours today by emailing info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephoning 01768 210 102 or go to the website mrvickies.co.uk. A big thanks as well to United Group Travel. They are a UK coach holiday firm based in Morpeth. For just £30 deposit, you can book a trip across the UK. There are no strangers on their buses, just friends you haven't met yet. They're taking bookings now for 2024 tours, and you can call them on 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174 or 07957 141 654. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And a big thanks as well to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. Please subscribe to the channel. All you need to do is hit the subscribe button. It's free. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video and click share to share to your other social media. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. If you want to help the channel financially, why not take out a one-off £25 membership? What do you get for your money? You get a scarf, you get a pen, you get a membership card and a cup, and you get entry into the monthly draw. How do you do it? Go to NUFCmatters.com. If you've got a smartphone, put your smartphone over this QR code and it will take you straight there. We also support the food bank on this channel. How do we do it? We do it virtually. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is the website. If you want to make a virtual donation today, go to that website and you can top up what they collect at the food bank outside the ground. We always advertise events on this channel as well. If you've got an event to advertise which has got a Newcastle United theme, please let us know. An evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson takes place at the Irish Centre. Tickets are £15. NUFCmatters.com for your tickets. The Tyne Theatre and Opera House are holding an event with Keegan, Beardsley and Waddle, the class of 84, 25th of January 2024. And you can book now 0844 249 1000. That's 0844 249 1000. If you go to NUFCmatters.com as well, we've got a couple of raffles ongoing. The Alan Shearer signed ball raffle, £1 a ticket. And the Kieran Trippier picture, £1 a ticket for that as well. And once the tickets are sold, the draw will be done. We've also got some T-shirts, which you can buy. The latest one, the latest hot seller is this one. Geordie's on tour. I've never seen a Mackem in Milan T-shirt with all of our Champions League fixtures on the back. Get yourself to NUFCmatters.com. Buy one today. And don't forget the Northeast Brekkie Show, 7 till 9, Monday to Friday on tuneradio.co.uk. You can also get us on DAB Radio, smart speakers, app, and online. Good morning. Welcome along to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Eddie Howe's press conference for the West Ham United game away on Sunday, and it is a 2 o'clock kickoff. No TV coverage this weekend. Reza was first up with his questions, and it was quite a good-hearted, a good-hearted press conference as usual. He asked about PSG. He said it was a special game. Have you had time to process the result? Eddie said he woke up the next day and he watched it back. He had a late night. So, you know, he watched it back. He enjoyed it. He says, I felt that the team played well. They were very committed, you know, and he hopes that the feeling like from that game lives long in the memories of the players and the supporters. He says, but now we focus. He says we have to focus on West Ham and we've got to get the psychology right. Have you had time to enjoy the results, said Razor? He says, for players, it's slightly different. You know, I'm sure they have had time to enjoy it. You live with that feeling for a while. He says, but as a manager and as a coach, you have to get, you know, your mind focused on the next game. And your job is to get the players to their optimum level for the next game, which, of course, is against West Ham. You've had an extra day's rest, says Razor. How important is that for you? West Ham, of course, having to play on Thursday night. He says, yep, it's nice to have an extra day's rest. He says, but we will play whenever we've got to play. He says it is a busy schedule, which is the reward for what we did last season and what we've given. So yeah, nice to have that extra day's rest. No doubt about that. What difference have you seen in West Ham? Asked Razor. Since they lost, obviously Declan Rice in the summer. Eddie said, yeah. He says Declan was, an important player. He was the heartbeat. He gave them stability. He said, but I feel with the money that they brought in, they've replaced well. They've signed some, smart technical players, and the players have come in and they've settled well. James Ward-Prowse has been one that he highlighted and said his delivery is really good. And he says that's why Newcastle United, my team, need to focus. We've got to deal with this and the game ahead. And from our perspective, we will be ready. Razor then asked him about Miggy. Obviously, he's been in really good form, scored the first goal in the Champions League game against PSG. And Eddie agreed with him. He said he's been very good. He's been very consistent. He said, a lot of people, I think, underestimated the goal that he scored the other night. He had to be really pinpoint with that. He scored a lot of good goals last year for us, important goals, which helped us. But yeah, he's in a very good vein of form at the moment. That was Razor from Radio Newcastle's questions. Keith Downey was next up from Sky. And he said, is it going to be hard to get the psychology right after this game? You got it right after the Milan game, but you've beat PSG comprehensively. Is it going to be a tougher turnaround for you? And he said, I hope not. He said, you've got to wait and see. You've got to hope that the players refocus. If you don't, then games in the Premier League are difficult enough without creating extra problems for yourself. He said we can't underestimate West Ham. We've got to deliver what we can deliver. And it was our job and is our job between now and Sunday to get the preparation right. So yeah, certainly all eyes on the West Ham ball from Eddie Howe. How pleased are you with the form, said Keith. After, the Champions League, he said, obviously the AC Milan game, you came back and you beat Sheffield United 8-0. Are you hoping for a similar kind of response performance-wise? And he said, yeah, look, we've been magnificent, since we came back after the Brighton game. He said we had a long time to think about that result. We didn't have the time together either. He said we came together to into the Brentford game and we got a result. And he says that positive energy has carried us through this set of fixtures. So yeah, very pleased with the form that we find ourselves in. Keith then asked him about injuries, and as I put on the short earlier on, Wilson and Joe Linton are both still in contention. We will have to wait and see whether they are fit or not on Sunday. Harvey Barnes, obviously long term, he's out. Sven Botman still out, and Anthony Gordon suspended. So that was his update on the injuries. Keith then said, well, obviously you're thin on the ground with players, certainly in one particular area of the pitch. But is it been pleasing to see that the players that have come in and taken their opportunities? And Eddie agreed. He said, yeah, look, he says that's the beauty of squad players. He says they've come in, they've taken the opportunities. And he said, like I said at the start of the season, from our perspective, everybody will feature. Everybody has a part to play. Keith then mentioned fans. He said when he came out of the ground, he saw some fans crying. Eddie said, well, as long as the tears of happiness, then I'm happy. Everybody laughed at that. And he said, look, we're in the game to make supporters proud, and we're in the game to affect them emotionally, but from a positive perspective. And that's what drives us. And he said, if they were tears of joy, he says, then it makes me happy. Andy Sixsmith was next. Asked him how his sons had reacted to the win against PSG. This was always quite humorous when he talks about his sons, but he said, look, they didn't say a lot. He says, but they can be quite vocal with criticism when things aren't going well. He said, but they did have a little chat about it, and then they wanted to go outside and play football and recreate some of the goals that had been scored. He said, but that's what I need. He says, it's great to have the kids to chat about and spend time with the family. He says, it brings me back to reality. And he says, I don't have an issue with things at all. He says, but it's just nice to have that family time and be brought back to reality. Andy asked him about all the the circus surrounding the Champions League. He mentioned the drones. He mentioned highlights being played on walls and stuff like that, and what he made of the circus, if he could call it that. And Eddie just said, I'm blindsided. He says, to be honest, he says, because I don't see it. He says, so I saw photographs of the drones, he says, which were great. He says, but I don't recall anything being played on buildings. He says, but I treat it like any game. He says, I constantly work in a bubble of work. And he says, I ask the players to do the same because that way you don't get distracted. Andy then asked him about Fabian Schär, scored that wonderful final goal on Wednesday night. He said he finds it hard to believe that we got him for £3 million. What is he worth now? Eddie said it's not about the price. A price is only what someone is willing to pay and what someone is willing to allow somebody to pay. And he said Fabian Schär has been excellent. He said if he was starting his career, it'd be worth a fortune. But he's in a rich vein of form. He's a good player, technically very good, and he's a top player. He then moved on, Andy Sixsmith, and said, are you surprised how things are going and how this particular period of games, have taken you, on this particular journey? And, he said, look, I've been involved long enough as a player and as a manager, to know that, you get highs and lows, and all you can try to do is be consistent and do your best. How do you harness positive energy and focus on a game, on each game, especially this game coming up against West Ham, was Andy's next question. And he said, it is interactions over the next 2 days that we have with our players. You can't afford to live in the past. The PSG game is in the past now. We'll move on from that. We now focus on West Ham. And he says, already mentally, I've moved on, the coaching staff's moved on, and the players need to move on. He says, because we go to West Ham and we've got to prove ourselves all over again. Andrew was next from the BBC. Are you surprised at the England squad only having Kieran Trippier in, and of course no place for Nick Pope or Callum Wilson? And Eddie just swerved this one, really. He just said, Gareth Southgate's got a tough enough job. I don't comment on his team selection, his squad selection. He says, all I know is that if you're going to get in the England squad as a player, then you need to perform consistently well. I guess some players may be unhappy about not being picked across clubs, and he says, and that's just the way it goes. But I'm not going to start commenting on Gareth Southgate's team. Is this break that you're going to have after this, the international break, much needed for some of the players, said Andrew. He said, yes, it is nice to have a break mentally. He says, but physically, he says, I don't think you need to have a break physically. He says, but you've got to get the load right, especially when you're playing as many games as we are playing. Andrew then mentioned about Lascelles stepping up. He's played well in the last couple of games since he came into the team. And Eddie praised him and just said, yeah, look, he's playing as he's trained. It's only been Botman and Fabian Schär keeping him out of the team. But he's been excellent in the last 2 games. I'm delighted for him. He's a model of consistency. Andrew then said he's done a few vox pops outside the ground after the Champions League game, and fans' expectations are through the roof. He spoke to some who feel like they could win the Champions League. Eddie said, I don't go into that. He says, my expectations are on winning the next game. I don't look long term. I look how we're going to perform in 2 days' time. I'll not be looking ahead any further than that. Andrew then mentioned about Sean Longstaff playing well, and, is a new contract potentially going to be on the table for him moving forward? I would imagine he's part of your long-term plans. And Eddie agreed that he is going to be part of his long-term plans because he's been vital, but couldn't open any, conversation on whether there was going to be a new contract anytime soon. Simon O'Rourke was next from ITV, asking about Jamal Lascelles again, saying he had that next man up attitude, and he says, how much do you need that within the squad? He went, yes, all players need to be ready to play and at their best. He says, and when they get into the team, they need to leave a positive impression. Jamal Lascelles has done that. Damien was next up. He said, you've sent shockwaves across Europe. Lots of people talking about that performance against PSG. What's it like to be talked about, across the world like that? And he said it's nice to be talked about no matter who is talking. And he says, look, we aim to win and we aim to play to the best of levels in every game. He said, I felt the performance on Wednesday was great, but he says off the ball, there's room for improvement. On the ball, I'm very happy. but we have to learn to elevate to new levels each and every week. Damien then mentioned Isak. He said there were shades of Shearer the other night, bandaged and bloodied. What difference has he made since he came to the club? Eddie said, yeah, he's taken the challenge on. It's been a big change for him when he came to England, and he felt what helped him early on was the injury, sitting back and watching and not being involved. It gave him an opportunity to see how the team played. And when he came back, he was excellent at the end of last season, with or without Callum Wilson alongside him. He said, but this season, again, he's improved. And the last few weeks, he's been very impressed with his desire to press and to work off the ball. He's been terrific. It's been nice to see. Luke Edwards carried on with his little jokes in the press conference. He said, be honest. Eddie said, I try. A lot of laughter. And then Luke said, apart from injuries, a lot of laughter. He said, have you ever hummed the song that the fans are singing about you and Jason Tindall? Eddie laughed. He went, no. He says, has Tindall? He said, you'll have to ask him. He said, I was tapping my foot to it the other night, though. Joking aside, Eddie was then asked by Luke, 2 years since the takeover, tomorrow, what direction has this club taken? Eddie said, hopefully upwards. 2 years, he says, the owners have been here. He says, they've been great so far. He says, they've given stability to the club. They've been consistent and level-headed. And he says, it helps when you're working internally at the club that you've got owners like that. The future looks bright, he said, but there's no guarantees. Money doesn't guarantee success. And it's just consistently achieving on and off the pitch that does. Where does being Newcastle United manager rank in your career? There's another question from Luke. He just started, and answered the question as he has in the past, that, when the moment came, I knew I was going to say yes. It's been life-changing. It's been a great job so far. Every morning I wake up proud to be the manager of the football club because I know I'm doing something very special and I'll never take it for granted. Luke also asked about potential expansion to St James's Park. Would he like to see it? And he said, I'd love to see it because, it means more fans get a chance to watch us play football. But like everything, it's not simple in life. There's a process to go through, but I'm sure that's the club's philosophy. Craig Hope from the Daily Mail was next. He said, the chairman was here the other night. Did you get a chance to meet him? He did. And he said, I did briefly break away from the press conference and the press chat to have a quick chat. He says it was short and sweet, but was words of encouragement on both sides. Craig then pushed that a little bit further and said, well, the documentary on Amazon, part of it was, the chairman saying that he wants Newcastle United to be number one. And Eddie just said, well, I've not had any meetings for some time, although he has been part of such meetings with the chairman and the owners. And, he basically just said, look, we're going to be the best we can be. I haven't set any targets. They haven't set any targets. My job is to maximize what I can get out of the squad that we have. Lee Ryder was next, talking about fans. A bit of confusion over his question at first, and he wasn't sure if he meant players or fans, but he said the young fans at the club at the moment are buoyant. I think we can beat teams like PSG, but older fans like myself look at games in different way, and we think maybe his tiredness might come into it, and we might get beat here and there. And once Eddie understood what the question was, he went, "It's difficult for me to answer the question because I don't go out and canvass opinion. This is all I need. All I know is that we need to prepare well for each and every game." He says, "I don't look at names of football clubs and concern myself. I look at the strengths and weaknesses of the team and look at the players." Lee then talked about the group of death. He says, you're giving yourself a real launch pad for potentially going on in the competition. Eddie wouldn't get carried away with that. He just said, look, it's been a good start. We got a good point in Milan when we perhaps didn't really deserve it. It wasn't a great performance. But I said at the start, our home form's crucial and there are difficult games to come. West Ham are used to playing European football after last year going all the way and winning a European trophy, said Lee. And, is that a bit of a leveler now? You seem to be getting used to doing it as well. Eddie agreed. He said, yeah, probably is. He said they did very well last year. He said they had a really interesting season, a memorable campaign. He says, and they will have learned a lot from playing 3 games a week. He said, so they've got the experience and they deserve huge credit for what they did last season. Didn't catch the name of the journalist who was up next. Are there lessons to learn for Anthony Gordon with this suspension, 5 yellow cards? Eddie Didn't say that there was lessons to be learned. He just said he'd be disappointed. He doesn't like to miss any games. He's very passionate. He's keen to show his worth, and obviously bookings have come thick and fast so far, and that he feels is down to the change in rules, change in laws and regulations this year. He said there's a little leeway on anything these days, and suspensions come to the fore more and more for players. And he says that's going to happen with Anthony. It's going to happen with other players, and it'll happen with players at other clubs. Are you monitoring Yakuba Minte, obviously at Feyenoord and doing quite well? Eddie agreed that he was. He said, look, when a player goes on loan, you just want him to do well. You want him to get game time. He says, and he's certainly doing that, and he's scoring goals. Kieran was next. He said, give me the audio was quite quiet on this, but the gist of the question was that, how do you feel that, it isn't all just about players that you brought in, but, it's a lot of the players that played the other night were players that you inherited. He agreed. He said, look, money is part of the success. I've said that in the past. He said, but the players we inherited formed a strong bond with us as soon as we came in. And, players that moved on after we stayed up in that relegation battle, still keep in touch, he said. And we just try to coach these players to be the best, whether we've inherited them or whether we've recruited them. Have you been amazed by the way that things have gone? Asked Kieran. And he said, I haven't been amazed. He says, these players have all got talents and gifts. He was talking in particular as well about the likes of Shaw and Longstaff, who we inherited. He said, but, we play as a team. We train as a team. We play as a team. And, we improve as a team. Oscar from the Sun was next. He said, the chairman says you want to be number one. Is it hard to not get carried away thinking that could be possible after beating a team like PSG 4-1? Eddie said he'd urge caution. And calm. He said, we've proved nothing. He says, a few weeks ago, we were in a bad run, and, questions were being asked in here were very different. He said, the form that we've shown now has put ourselves in a good position. He said, but we don't look ahead any further than, Sunday's game, and that's going to be crucial. Is there any reason why you can't, be number one? Asks Oscar. And he went, well, we aren't number one at the moment. There's no magic wand to get to that position. Just hard work and consistency will. He didn't want to get drawn on that. Martin Hardy asked about bringing the family. How big a decision was it to bring your family with you? He said, look, when I decided to take the job, it was a necessity to have my family here, because for me, it doesn't work without them. My actions, to bring the family here were deliberate, and I feel happy and stable with them being here. Last question came from an unknown journalist. Again, didn't hear the name, but just basically asking about, the top six. Is it now the top 7 or top 8? He said, I'll let you decide. That's not for me to say. It's more for the media. He says, my job is just to build the strongest team. And the last question of the press conference, which seemed to end quite abruptly on Newcastle's website and YouTube. You said you had a late night. Were you celebrating? And he said, well, no, it's not what you think. He says, we were up late talking. So that was the press conference that was. And we will be back with the Amigos today at 5 o'clock. Tom Dixon says, referee for Sunday's game is Peter Banks and VAR is Andy Madeley. Gary, good morning. Les, hope you're doing well. Bringing in a sports psychologist to foster a winning mentality might just pay dividends on Sunday, says Les. And Kevin Hawthorne, good morning. Hope you're well. Why would he not bring his family? Didn't understand that question. Me neither, Les. Okay, have a good afternoon. I will be back 5 o'clock. And Stu Penman is going to be a special guest on the Amigos tonight, as there will be no chance for him to do the professionals this weekend. Take care. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.